Face and name of the alleged Pretoria restaurant rape suspect has been splashed across social media. This is a violation of legislation that says a rape suspect can only be named once they've been charged and once they've pleaded. But besides the law, why is it important to protect the accused's identity? Joining me now is William Bird from Media Monitoring Africa to look at what needs to happen, what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened in this case. William, good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, you've been seeing what's been coming out on social media, especially over the past 24 hours or so. I mean, and we've seen certain images. We've seen certain videos on Facebook, and I think we here have confirmed the identity of the person, but you've seen other things that are actually not related, and that's the danger we're talking about here.
So it's really interesting because, of course, about a decade and a half ago now, there was the instance of baby Sepang.
Yes.
And she was allegedly gang raped by, I think, between 9 and 11 men. And because the media at the time, this is before social media was as big, they named these people before they had a chance to plead. It then turned out that of those 11 or 9 men, only 2 of them were actually involved. So the other 7 men had nothing to do at all with it. You know, they just happened to live in the same area, but they lost their jobs, they were beaten up, they were assaulted, their families were assaulted, all sorts of things happened to them because they were named. And this is the danger. So the fact that we now, taking us to now, we've got a scenario where, thankfully, I think the majority of our credible media have said we're not going to name this person, as they generally shouldn't until they've pleaded. What the danger is on social media, because it facilitates this spewing of anger and of you know, the outrage, which is completely appropriate to a large degree. What you're seeing is different people, different faces, and also people not necessarily related directly to the instance being identified. And you can imagine the very real life consequences that may
with emotions running so
people.
high at the moment.
So I think, you know, we haven't seen this yet in South Africa, but there was a case a couple of years ago in the UK where someone was named in the media as being involved and linked to a sexual assault case. And what that man did was he went and he sued every single one of the people that had named him and retweeted him on Twitter. That can, and at some point it is likely to happen here. So people need to be very, very careful about it. I think people should, you know, vent their anger about this, highlight the racial dynamics that are there, because they are there. But, you know, we need to be careful about just wanting to name him and threaten to necklace him and kill him and all of these kinds of things. Instead of saying, well, we don't actually know that this is the person.
Now, like you say, the racial undertones are there. That's come out as well. We've had people, I mean, some people even tweeting me this morning about, you know, why we don't name him, and is it because it's a white man? If it was a black man, this would have happened. Every case is different, and in some cases, the victims or the survivors are related to the person. So in some cases, and that we've had recently as well, the child can be identified through that case. So every case has its own dynamics, and I think we have to also be mindful of that when we say because it's a black man, because it's a white man, this is why the media is dealing with it in a certain way.
So look, I think that we can't get away from that. We have to ask, why is it that this case is getting the prominence that it is? You know, there's a video there.
And you can't identify the child through this.
You know, on average, 2.7 children are raped every single day in our country, every single day. So why this particular case, and why now? You know, and I think that a lot of it has to do with the idea that, and I'm actually really angry about this outrage about this particular case. People are willing to go and kill this man, whereas in fact, you know, very often and most often, and you look at the figures, the overwhelming majority of children who are sexually assaulted, it happens within the family or within particular relatives that they know. If we could see this kind of anger being harnessed towards those things, because those are the majority of instances, then we might start to be a little bit more constructive about it. But you can also have no doubt that if a child had been raped in a shebeen over the weekend, you know, in an informal settlement, I very much doubt that there would be the same level of outrage. So we do have to tease those kinds of things apart. You know, it's not a matter of saying, well, you know, race doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, and in this case also, I mean, as much as yes, you want to be angry about what has happened, and you might not want to have any sympathy for those who are even around or associated with the suspect. We've got to think. I mean, we saw videos of apparently he was engaged not too long ago, a picture of who's supposed to be his fiancée in this. You've got to think about the safety of those who probably didn't even know that this person was capable of something like this.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen you know, a variety of different people on Twitter that have been identified as the rapist. And
And
You know,
that's so
maybe one
dangerous.
of them is actually the rapist, but that's not my call. And the whole reason you have a justice system is precisely so that you can go through the facts and that the man can face the full might of the law as he should. You know, none of us think that this man should get away with it. But it's a very different thing, you know, going around and just saying, okay, well, this is the way we're going to deal with these people. Because we have seen many instances. You know, not too long ago, there was a case of that young boy who was violently assaulted because he was allegedly part of a gang, you know, and he nearly lost his life. These things have very real consequences, and we need to be very careful about stoking that anger. And again, as I've said, it's kind of a limited anger. It's almost like people are happy to be angry at the monster without and not so much with the monster within. If people want to start pointing fingers, they need to be going, what's happening in our community actually?
And we also have to guard against being that person, because social media is all about a race, right? It's all about, we want to be the first to have put this out there. Not just traditional media, social media, because everyone's a reporter now. And we've got to guard against somebody just doing this because they want to be, I was the person who told you who this person was, and I've outed him. And that's also the other danger of being part of that race.
And ultimately, these things may well have legal consequences. If you're one of the people who's been identified wrongly and you see all of these tweets, I think you'd have a very strong case for legal action, for defamation against the overwhelming majority of these people.
So what happens very quickly, William, I mean, just a thought that popped in is, if this man goes, when he goes to court next and whether he pleads, if he pleads not guilty, what happens then with the case about, and I'm not a legal expert, but the case about whether we identify who he is or not. If he says, I'm not guilty, you know, if he pleads, how then does the argument still?
So because it's, I mean, look, generally people that are accused of these sorts of serious crimes, they should be named and identified. You know, there's not to say that you shouldn't. It's a basic principle of open justice, and there's a public interest in knowing that. But because this is a sexual offence, you're not to name him until he's pleaded, right? And very often these things occur before they've been charged. Oscar Pistorius, for example, was named well before the guy had even been arrested by the police, let alone, you know, so there are these things, and there he was named and identified by, you know, the overwhelming majority of media, and it was already out before anyone could do anything about it. But imagine if in a different scenario things had been slightly different. And we see these things far too often. And I guess the central argument here is that if we're trying to build a society that cares for our children, that cares for the people within our communities, the way we aren't going to be building that if we immediately jump to ideas and want to name and want to damage and want to threaten and violate people. Violence begets violence. We need to be saying, how do we prevent violence? And one of the ways we do that is to say we need to de-escalate violence on social media itself, you know, and so that means think before you post these things. Think about the potential consequences. What if this isn't the person? And then take it from there.